rush paradiddle. My mother taught me that. You work it slow, let it rest, and if you try to force it before it's ready, it falls apart in the water every time. I thought about that on the Thursday afternoon I got the text from my daughter. I was standing at my kitchen counter in Sudbury, flour on my hands, and my phone lit up on the cutting board beside me. "Mum, I wanted to talk to you before you made any plans for August. Darren thinks it would be better for everyone if we used the cabin just for our family this summer. You understand, right? I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter and kept working the dough. I want to tell you about the cabin, because if you don't know what it meant to me, none of the rest of this makes any sense. My husband, Walter, died in February of 2016, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, which is not enough time to say everything you need to say to a person, but it is somehow also too much time to spend watching someone you love disappear in front of you. We had been married 31 years. He was a geologist. He had rough hands, and he laughed too loud in restaurants, and he made the best scrambled eggs I have ever eaten in my life. And I have never figured out what he did differently. He had a small life insurance policy through work, not enormous. Walter was a practical man, and we had always planned to sell the house in Sudbury when we retired and move somewhere smaller, up near Killarney. That had been the plan for years. A little place near the water, mornings on a dock with coffee, that kind of life. After he died, I put the insurance money in a savings account, and I didn't touch it for almost a year. I wasn't ready. Then one morning in January, I drove up to the Killarney area by myself, just to see, just to breathe some different air. And there was a piece of land on a small lake off Highway 637. Nothing fancy, just 2 acres with a narrow strip of shoreline and some old pines, and the real estate agent said the owner was motivated and the price was lower than anything I'd seen. I bought it. I used Walter's insurance money and some of my own retirement savings, and I bought it. The following spring, I hired a small local contractor named Bruce and his nephew to build a simple, single-story cabin. Nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living area with big windows facing the water, and a covered porch running the length of the front. Walter had always wanted a covered porch. He used to say you could sit out in any weather if you had a good roof over your head. I made decisions on that build that I had never made on anything before. I chose the pine paneling on the interior walls. I chose the fieldstone for the fireplace. I picked out the fixtures at a hardware store in Espanola, and I carried them to the truck myself. Bruce thought it was funny, this 62-year-old retired schoolteacher hauling boxes of plumbing fixtures across a parking lot. I didn't think it was funny. I thought it was the most purposeful I had felt since Walter's funeral. I have a photograph from that summer, taken by Bruce's nephew on his phone. I am standing on the half-finished porch with a coffee in my hand, looking out at the lake. My hair is a mess, and I'm wearing one of Walter's old flannel shirts that I brought up because I didn't care if it got paint on it. I look tired. I look happy. That photo sits on the shelf above my kitchen table in Sudbury. My daughter, Tanya, came to see it that August with her husband Darren and their 2 boys, Caleb and Owen. Tanya was thrilled. She walked through every room and kept saying, "Mum, this is so beautiful, Mum. I can't believe you did this." The boys ran straight into the lake the moment they arrived, and I don't think they came out for 3 hours. Darren grilled steaks on the little propane barbecue I'd bought at Canadian Tire, and we sat on the porch after the boys went to bed and listened to the loons, and I thought, yes, this is what it was for. This is right. That was the first summer. For the next several years it was easy and lovely. I went up on my own whenever I wanted, early June. Before it got busy, September, when the families had all gone home and the lake turned dark and still and the maples started to go. Tanya and Darren brought the boys up for 2 weeks every July. My friend Meredith and I went up together in August a couple of times. Her husband had passed the year before Walter, and we had that particular understanding between us that only people who have lost someone can have. We didn't have to explain anything to each other. We sat on the porch and drank wine and watched the sun go down. And it was enough. Darren is in sales. I don't know exactly what he sells. Some kind of industrial equipment, I think. And he is very good at it in the way that people who never entirely stop performing are very good at things. He is handsome and he has an easy manner, and he remembers details about people in a way that initially seems warm and later starts to feel calculated. The first time I noticed something shift was the summer of 2022. They had been up at the cabin for 10 days when I drove up to join them for the last few days of their stay, as I always did. When I arrived, Darren was in the middle of explaining to Tanya that the porch railing needed to be replaced and that the dock was too short for the kind of boat he was thinking about getting. I stood in the doorway with my bag and listened to him describe in some detail modifications to my property that I had never been consulted about. I let it go. He had a lot of energy, Darren. He was always optimizing something. I told myself it was enthusiasm. But the next summer, 2023, things moved further. They arrived 2 days before me, and when I pulled into the gravel drive, I noticed someone had pressure washed the porch and moved the rocking chairs I'd had there since the beginning, the ones I'd found at an estate sale in Chelmsford, stripped back and repainted myself, and replaced them with a set of new Muskoka chairs in a bright Adirondack red that I found aggressively cheerful. My chairs were stacked at the side of the cabin near the woodpile. When I mentioned it to Tanya, she said Darren had gotten a good deal on the Muskoka chairs and thought they'd look nicer. She said it quickly and didn't quite meet my eyes. That night after the boys were in bed, Darren suggested very reasonably that it might make more sense for the cabin to be on a rental platform for the weeks it sat empty. He had done the math, he said. Between VRBO and Airbnb, a property like this could bring in $12,000 to $15,000 a year. That was meaningful money, and it would cover the property taxes, the maintenance, the insurance. I said I would think about it. He said, "The thing is, if we're going to list it, we'd want to upgrade a few things. The kitchen appliances are a bit dated. The bathroom could use a refresh. I've been talking to a contractor in Espanola." I set my wine glass down on the porch railing, the original porch railing, which was perfectly fine. And I said, "Darren, you've been talking to a contractor about my cabin." He smiled the way he smiles. "Just preliminary conversations, Maureen. Just exploring the options." I did not pursue it further that night. I should have. That is the thing I have replayed the most in the years since. If I had said clearly and firmly in that moment, "This is not your cabin. You do not speak to contractors about my cabin, and if you like to continue coming here, you need to understand that things might have been different." But I have spent my whole life being the person who smooths things over, who keeps the peace, who says, "Let's not ruin the evening." My mother was the same way. Her mother before her. It is a particular habit that women of my generation were trained into without even knowing it was training. So I said, "Let's talk about it another time," and I went inside. The text from Tanya came the following July, as I said while I was making pierogies. I read it again that evening. "Mum, I wanted to talk to you before you made any plans for August. Darren thinks it would be better for everyone if we used the cabin just for our family this summer. You understand, right?" I wrote back and said, "It's my cabin, Tanya. I'll be there the second week of August as always. Let me know what days work for you to overlap." She called me that night. She said she knew it was my cabin. Of course, she knew that. But Darren had invited his brother's family to come up that same week, the Hendersons from Calgary, and it would be crowded, and wouldn't it be easier for me to come a different time? I said, "Tell Darren's brother's family the dates don't work. The second week of August is my week." There was a pause. Then Tanya said, "Mum, Darren already confirmed with them." I said, "Then Darren will have to unconfirm." We ended the call without resolving it. 3 days later, I got a text from Darren directly. That was the first time he had ever texted me about the cabin. It said, "Maureen, just want to be transparent with you. We've put a lot of time and energy into that property, and we feel like we should have some say in how it's used. We're not trying to cut you out, but it would be good to have a proper conversation about the future of the cabin. Maybe we should get a lawyer to draw something up so everyone's protected." I read that text at my kitchen table. It was 7 in the morning. I had a cup of tea. The light was coming through the east window the way it does in July, that long, low gold that doesn't last. The phrase that stayed with me was a lot of time and energy. I thought about Bruce and his nephew building those walls in the spring of 2017. I thought about driving to Espanola for plumbing fixtures. I thought about the fieldstone fireplace and the pine paneling and the rocking chairs I had stripped and painted myself, which were now stacked beside the woodpile, because Darren had found a good deal on something cheerful. I thought about Walter's flannel shirt. I did not respond to Darren's text. Instead, I called my friend Meredith. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she said, "Maureen, you know what you need to do." I did know. I had known since I read the word lawyer in that text, not because a lawyer frightened me, because Darren, using that word, told me something I had been trying not to see. He wasn't suggesting a legal arrangement to protect me. He was beginning a process that would end with him having a claim on something that was mine. I called my own lawyer the next morning. Her name is Angela, and she has handled my affairs since Walter died. And she is exactly the kind of woman you want in your corner, which is to say she is warm and thorough, and she does not waste time. I told her everything. She listened. Then she said, "Has Darren's name ever been added to the title?" It had not. "Has Tanya's name ever been added?" It had not. "Have they ever contributed financially to the property, taxes, maintenance, any documented payments?" They had not. Angela said, "Maureen, this is straightforward. It's your property. He has no legal standing whatsoever. But if you're asking me what I'd do," she paused, "I'd list it." I thought about that for 2 weeks. I went up to the cabin alone in the last week of July. Tanya and Darren had taken the boys to Wasaga Beach after I wouldn't back down about August, which told me something too. And I spent 4 days there by myself. I walked the shoreline in the mornings. I sat on the porch in the evenings in my rocking chairs, which I had moved back from beside the woodpile the first hour I arrived. I watched the herons standing in the shallows at dusk. I made tea and I read, and I thought. On the 3rd morning I walked out to the end of the dock, and I stood there for a long time looking at the water. There is a particular quality to a northern Ontario lake in late July, before the summer crowds are fully gone. That light on the water in the early morning when the surface is still, and the far shore is just pine and rock and sky. Walter had never seen it. I had built this place after he was gone, with money that represented the last material piece of him, and I had never once regretted it. But I thought about what the cabin had become. I thought about Darren's text and Muskoka chairs in aggressive red and contractors in Espanola being consulted about my kitchen appliances. I thought about the word entitled and what it means when the people you love start using your things without asking, and then start using your things as if asking is no longer necessary. I thought about what my mother used to say. She used to say that some things cannot be shared back into yours once they have been shared away. I never understood that when she said it. I understood it now. I listed the cabin the 2nd week of August. I used a realtor named Joanne who had sold 3 other properties on Matt Lake and knew exactly what it was worth. The market in that area had moved considerably since 2017, with the addition of the porch, the dock, the fieldstone fireplace, the work that Bruce and his nephew had put into it. Joanne said we could ask $380,000, and she expected to have offers within 2 weeks. She was right. We had 2 offers in 9 days. I accepted the stronger one, a couple from Barrie who were planning to use it as a family cottage and had a 12-year-old daughter who, Joanne told me, had burst into tears in the living room because she loved it so much. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. I did not tell Tanya until the sale was firm and the possession date was set. I called her on a Wednesday evening. She answered on the 2nd ring, cheerful. asking if I wanted to plan something for Thanksgiving. I said, "Tanya, I need to tell you something. I've sold the cabin." The silence was very long. Then she said, "What?" I said, "I listed it in August. It sold quickly. Possession is October the 1st. She said, "Mom, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you? We could have—" And then she stopped. I waited. She said, "Darren is going to be devastated." And there it was. Not, "I'm going to be devastated." Not, "Mum, I can't believe you'd do this without talking to us." The first name out of her mouth was Darren's. I said, "Tanya, I want you to hear something from me clearly. That cabin was mine. I built it with your father's insurance money and my own savings. I made every decision about it. I paid every bill for it. No one was ever listed on that title except me." I paused. "Darren texted me in July to tell me I should speak to a lawyer. So I did." Another long silence. I said, "I love you. I love the boys." Darren's name being attached to something of mine was never going to happen, and I should have said that out loud much sooner than I did. "That is something I have to live with," she cried. I let her. I didn't try to fix it or soften it, because it wasn't mine to fix. She and Darren had been building something in their minds, an idea of that cabin as theirs, a future in which they were the ones who decided who came and when, and what got renovated. And that idea was not real and had never been real, and the kindest thing I could do was not pretend otherwise. We talked for almost an hour. By the end she was quieter. She said she needed time. I said I understood. I took the proceeds from the sale, and I did a few things Walter and I had always talked about. I put a substantial portion into a TFSA and a GIC, properly organized, with Angela's help. I updated my will. I booked 2 weeks in Cape Breton for the following June, somewhere I had always wanted to go. And I called Meredith and told her what I'd done, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Good for you, Maureen. Good for you. The rocking chairs I kept. They're on my back deck in Sudbury now, facing the yard. Not a lake, but the light is still good in the evenings, and I still have my tea." Tanya and I are finding our way back. It is slow, and there are conversations still ahead of us that neither of us is quite ready for. But she called me in October and asked if she and the boys could come for Christmas, just the 3 of them, and she said it in a way that sounded like she meant it, not like a performance and not like something Darren had decided. I said yes. Caleb and Owen arrived at my door in December with snow on their boots and enormous appetites, which is the way children should arrive at a grandmother's house. Owen, who is 9 and very serious, sat at my kitchen counter and watched me make pierogies with the focus of a surgeon. He asked if he could help crimp the edges. I showed him how. You work it slow, you let it rest, you don't force it before it's ready. Walter knew that. I'm still learning. I have been thinking about the word entitlement for a long time now, and I've decided it isn't really about greed. Not at its root. Entitlement grows in the silence that other people leave. Darren didn't wake up one morning and decide to take something from me. He moved into the space I kept not filling. Every time I said, "Let's not ruin the evening," I left a little more room, and he, being the kind of person he is, filled it. That is the part I had to sit with longest, not what he did, but what I allowed by staying quiet. There is something that happens to women of a certain age, and I think it happens to men too, but I can only speak for myself, where we confuse keeping the peace with being good. I was raised to smooth things over. I thought that was kindness. And sometimes it is, but there is a version of it that isn't kindness at all. It's avoidance dressed up in a good coat. When Darren moved my rocking chairs to the woodpile and I said nothing, I wasn't being gracious. I was teaching him that I could be moved. The clearest thing I know now is this. The moment I called Angela and stopped waiting for Darren to become someone different, something shifted in me that I hadn't realized was misaligned. Not anger, clarity. Those are not the same thing, though people sometimes confuse them. Anger wants something from the other person. Clarity doesn't need anything from anyone. I think about Tanya a lot. I love my daughter. I have loved her since she was 4 minutes old, and I suspect I will love her past any point where it is convenient or easy. But love is not the same as surrender, and I spent too many years not knowing the difference. The hardest thing I have ever done as a mother was not the sleepless nights when she was small, or the arguments when she was a teenager. The hardest thing was staying steady on that phone call when she cried, and I didn't try to fix it. Letting the consequences of real choices land where they were supposed to land. That took more out of me than any of the rest of it. Walter used to say that the most honest thing a person can do is know what they actually think and say it plainly. He was better at that than I was. I'm still learning it at 64, which is later than I would have liked, but here we are. What I want to say to anyone listening is this. The things you build with your own hands and your own grief and your own stubborn hope belong to you. Not legally. I mean something deeper than that. They are made of something that cannot be transferred without your consent, and the moment someone starts making decisions about them as though your consent is a formality, that is the moment to speak. Not loudly, not with a list of grievances, just clearly and once, the way you would say any true thing. I sold the cabin. I kept the rocking chairs. Owen learned to crimp pierogies at my counter in December. The light through the east window in the morning is still good. Some things you cannot rush. Some things, once you're finally ready, you don't hesitate on at all.